illness. But a South African research shows that when one adds the election fever, this becomes a potent recipe for mental health risk. To find out more, we're joined now from our studios in Cape Town by Nicole Jennings. She's a spokesperson for Pharma Dynamics. Nicole, a very good morning to you. What's this research all about?
Good morning. Yes, so what we did, Pharma Dynamics conducted a nationwide poll among South Africans, and we looked at the impact of the elections on the overall mental wellness of the nation. And we had some very interesting findings. We saw that 75% of South Africans said that they are deeply concerned about the political future of the country. 30% said that they were actually concerned about going and casting their vote at an election station. And we also say that 40% of South Africans suffer from election-related insomnia. So overall, it is quite a politically tense situation in the country at the moment. And of course, continuous impact of stress and this type of political tension in the country can ultimately have an impact on not only mental health, but physical health as well.
You're saying that they're experiencing insomnia and anxiety. This is quite serious. Were you able to pick out any specific reasons? What is it about politics that's making them anxious? Is there any possibility of getting involved in their communities that could help in them engaging in these issues and perhaps reducing the tensions?
Yes, so it's not a localized phenomenon, this anxiety around the political election. It is something that does take place globally in different countries when there is a particular political change that takes place, and particularly election years do lead to a bit more tension and stress in communities. Yeah. In South Africa particularly, we are in a situation where it is very personal. Politics are quite personal in the country, and you do find in many cases that people are sourcing their news not always from credible sources. So, if you are checking your social media channels every hour, for example, you could be exposed to different people's opinions that's not always responsible reporting and a true reflection of the real political state. And this does get heightened around an election year as more and more people start to post opinions and start to share propaganda. And all of this does impact on the nation's stress. You mentioned also a way of dealing with the stress and coping with it. One thing to do is to consume news more responsibly and more selectively. So maybe look at the channels that you gather your news from, and try to look at your news only once in the morning and once in the evening, so you're not continuously exposed to all the different tensions. Then of course also taking care of your physical health. A balanced diet and staying physically active is a great way to manage stress and to get rid of some of that tension. And then what you can also do is cast your vote. At the end of the day, a lot of the tension and the anxiety around elections come from a sense of powerlessness. But by casting your vote and having a voice, you can in a way manage that stress and have an outlet for all the anxiety and in certain instances a powerlessness that you feel around this type of tension.
Well, in this particular election in South Africa, where there's a much more increased number of political parties participating in the ballot, is this adding to the stress in terms of confusion and people not knowing what options there are? We were talking to somebody yesterday who participated in the special vote, saying that the party they used to vote for is no longer on the ballot, so they now have to consider a new option. Are these increasing the tensions? Are these factors increasing the tension?
Well, it certainly could be contributing to the tension. Again, with a wide variety of political parties actively campaigning during an election year, you have a wide variety of voices out there. And you also have different stances when it comes to propaganda. And again, the reality is that politics are personal in this country, and you do find that there are certain voices that could, in certain instances, play on those very personal ideologies around the different political parties. So that certainly would increase the tension. And definitely, so by also familiarizing yourself with exactly what options are available to you, and making sure that that tension in the moment of having to make a decision and casting your vote isn't overwhelming. It could be a wonderful way to deal with the tension, to educate yourself on the different parties and sort of the ideals and the values that they stand for.
Nicole, it's such an important piece of research. Mental health is an important aspect of our communities. Thank you so much for talking to us. Nicole Jennings is a spokesperson for Pharma Dynamics. And here in studio we have Professor Mdletsane. Prof, let's look at the political parties. 48 nationally, a much bigger number in the different provinces. What kind of could this contribute to confusion?
Well, previously, yes, you could have that. For instance, parties like AIC, for instance, linked or placed very close to the ANC, even APC. We heard earlier from one of the IEC commissioners saying that they've simplified the ballot paper. ANC, APC, and the AIC are separated. Yes. They are separated quite nicely on the ballot paper. The logos are clear. But it does mean that it will take somewhat longer, perhaps, depending on where your party is on the ballot paper. You have to, it's a booklet, so you have to scroll down. Yeah. But in terms of identifying your choice, I think the ballot paper is designed to help you so that the mark that you make is a true expression of your intention.
Mr. Tselane, what has been your experience? You're working now within the Institute of Election Management Services, IMSA. What new voting pattern or voting interventions can be brought about to make this process easier?
Well, one of the issues that I have suggested was that I think the current situation is unsustainable, where we still doing manual voting, that the country has reached a point now where we should seriously consider electronic voting. Yeah. And I know that quite a number of people who raise concerns around electronic voting, they always talk about issues of how do you make sure that the machine is not manipulated. And I've suggested previously that with electronic voting, you must actually have a paper trail, such as when you go to an ATM, you are able to get a piece of paper indicating your transaction. So that is something that could be relied on if there is a dispute. But I think that is the direction that the country should.
We're a long way off, though, because already there's a paper that's come out about how South Africans are anti-online campaigning. So get to the actual voting itself, that could be a different conversation.
I really don't think that we are that far. I mean, look, our neighbors around the corner here, Namibia, they are already using electronic voting. DRC recently, they are using electronic voting. And the DRC, by the way, when they move in this direction, it is largely because in order to vote in the DRC election, you were getting almost 5 pages of a ballot paper. So that situation was unsustainable. So now the level of excitement...
conversation altogether, though, there.
Absolutely. So, but it's something that should actually be explored as a possibility. We can't be talking about fourth industrial revolution.
We can't ignore it.
I mean, look at in Gauteng, Panyasa Lusufi has already introduced paperless classrooms. Why is it difficult then in the electoral field for us to begin to move in that direction?
All right, we're in conversation with Professor Mdletsane and Mr. Terry Tselane. We'll continue this conversation. Right now, let's go through to Pretoria.